people perceive the border in different ways depending on where they live. If I'm a fifth generation Texan with three grandparents who were born in Mexico, and our perception of the border is we don't see much difference between the people that live on our side of the border and those that live on the other side. My mother was born in Harlingen, Texas, but went to school in Matamoros, Mexico. People that I grew up with may have been born in Brownsville, but lived in Matamoros and would come across to go to school with us. So we had a, so on our border, we view each other as friends, family, neighbors, and we had never really viewed the border as a dividing line. There are perceptions in different places. For example, there's a member of Congress from Iowa who I think has very negative perceptions of our border, and he probably doesn't realize that the trade relationship between his state and the country of Mexico is, probably worth over 100,000 jobs to his state. Probably the value of the trade, I don't have the figures in front of me, is like $4 billion or something like that. And so I think those of us who represent the border have an obligation to educate the rest of the country so that they can begin to view the border the same way we do.
Yeah, there is an element of negativity with respect to what people think about the border. On our side, it's a misunderstanding or a profound ignorance of what really goes on at the border. But there's more respect for what happens there, because on our side, our communities are much larger with respect to the rest of the country than on the U.S. side. So we've got very important cities for Mexico, like Tijuana and Juarez, whereas on the U.S. side, maybe San Diego, maybe El Paso. But in reality, relatively speaking, the border cities for us are much more important than they are for the United States. On both sides, I think ignorance reigns, right? It's a serious problem because that has implications on the political scale. And what it means is that people in Mexico City and in Washington, D.C. are making decisions about the border without really having a clue as to what it really means. It is the most crossed border in the world, 330 border crossing stations. If 350 million people, that's basically 1 million people crossing the border every single day. And it's staggering, and literally tens of millions of people's jobs depend directly on trade at the border. So it's not something that can or should or can be taken lightly, and yet we are very ignorant of it.
I believe that if perceptions in the United States about our business relationship with Mexico if people knew how tremendous the value of that relationship was, that it would change their perceptions, and it can only enhance the value of trade going further. On that note, I would also say that with respect to security on the Mexican side of the border, if given the current situation, if 6 million U.S. jobs depend on trade with Mexico now, and billions and billions of dollars are exchanged between these two countries, can you imagine what it would be like if the security issues were resolved?
I am a profound believer that we have not scratched the surface of the potential for the border. On both sides, the communities on the border on both sides are growing faster than the national average, whether it's for the United States or for Mexico. So people are actually making a conscious decision to move to that area for one reason or another. Even though we're moving towards a better dynamic in terms of the border crossings, the sheer scale of it. I mean, I ask people to think of San Isidro. San Isidro is the border crossing, one of the main border crossings between Tijuana and San Diego. on the busiest border in the world, it is the most crossed border, and that crossing station is the most crossed crossing station in the world on the busiest. So we currently have something like 26 lanes of traffic between the two, and we are going to 70. That's 70. So try to imagine what that means. And what it boils down to is infrastructure. What we're doing is reacting. We have not been proactive. Neither the United States nor Mexico has been proactive in doing any of this. Things are happening in spite of us. And imagine if we were to take a leadership role and accept what's really going on. I mean, the human and economic potential is really unbelievable.
Probably the most important thing that we can do in Congress is pass immigration reform. And I believe that what we need is a legalization process that allows the people that are in this country now contributing to our economy to be a part of our country. And I believe that to the extent that we talk about border security, I think it's a mistake to condition the legalization process on border security measures, because we're talking about, on the one hand, people who are already here contributing to our country, and on the other hand, we're talking about what are we going to do in the future of making sure that we have that people who are coming across are coming across in a legal fashion. So I think those two things need to be kept separate. And I also believe that to the extent that the legalization process produces revenue for the United States, given the fee and fines, that instead of spending it on border walls and border patrol agents, that what we ought to be doing is spending that on port of entry infrastructure that will enhance the flow of trade.
Speaking with Assistant Secretary Alan Burson, and speaking with U.S. authorities, my district in Mexico City includes the residents of the American Embassy. So speaking with my constituent, Ambassador Wayne, I think that, for one thing, you have to understand that the relationship already is the most intense between two countries on the planet. The only place outside of Washington, D.C., where every single U.S. government dependency is represented, the only place outside of Washington, outside of the United States, outside of Washington, is Mexico City. So you can imagine the intensity of the relationship. And I think that the rank and file of the U.S. government in its day-to-day operations really understands the strength, the immediacy of the relationship, and has responded in kind. And to its credit, the Mexican government has, over the last 10 years, and this said by U.S. officials, has opened itself to much more collaboration that was possible even just a few years ago. So I think things are happening. But what we need to do on behalf of official Washington really needs to start getting, and official Mexico City as well, but specifically official Washington needs to start getting away from the stereotypes and start understanding the reality. Start understanding that so many millions of their constituents are not only along the border region, but they depend on the border region and its proper functioning for their livelihoods. So I think that the very basic thing is obviously infrastructure investment. But there are several things. When I speak on behalf of Mexico, and this is something, given the fact that I do love this country very much, I love the United States very much. It's a country where I've spent a lot of my life, and so. But for me, it's very comforting because I can speak as a Mexican official. I can speak on behalf of Mexico, knowing that right now, at this particular juncture in time, what's good for Mexico is automatically good for the United States. And so what my invitation is that we can understand the border's importance and start doing the little things. On our border communities, one of the biggest issues is repatriation, or deportation on behalf of the United States, or repatriation if you look at it on the Mexican side. So you've got literally millions of people that are being taken back across the border, and they're being left in these communities that have very little capacity for responding to them. It's because they're not even from there. Many are not even Mexican. A lot of these, I mean, right now in the news, you've got the Central American children, right? And they're coming through Mexico. And this has been a problem which has now been exacerbated. But they're being repatriated to these areas where organized crime is being very effective at going and recruiting them and extorting them and doing all sorts of horrible things. And those kinds of things where we can work together. Here at the Wilson Center, I just spoke to a businessman from the border, from Laredo, and he said, you know, in terms of repatriation, I can offer the facilities. I have the space. I have the physical space. I can pull together the money because there's massive amounts of money on the border. Money is not the problem, curiously enough. It's just a question of channeling the money properly. And he offered, if they're going to repatriate, at least send them to a secure location where they can be clothed and fed and where they're not going to be preyed on in the middle of the night by these organized criminal gangs. So just by understanding the dynamic, just by banging heads together, I think we can move much more quickly, much more quickly forward for the benefit of both countries.
Final question.
Well, I think we've begun to see legislative moves in Mexico that are moving in the right direction. For example, the new Mexican energy reforms, I think will provide tremendous value to both countries. The recent response by the federal government in Mexico City to the issues of violence in the state of Tamaulipas, I think are a step in the right direction. They, of course, have a challenge before them, but I think that they're doing the right thing, and I think that the United States needs to support those measures fully.
Traditionally, Mexico has made what I think is a mistake, which is to really focus on trying to lift certain areas of the country and subsidize those areas very, very heavily. And those things that are working, we haven't strengthened them, and we leave them to be, and we leave them to their own devices, right? And so what you get is a lot of subsidy towards those things that are not working. I take the example of Guerrero and Tamaulipas. Both have, right now, they both have serious crime issues, right? Public security issues. But as opposed to Tamaulipas, which Tamaulipas includes the counterpart to the most important land port in the United States, which is Laredo, Texas. On our side, it's Nuevo Laredo. Just through there, it's about $100 billion worth of commerce per year. Just through that. It's more important than Detroit, Windsor, the Ambassador Bridge and all that. It's the most important inland port in the United States. So the reason I mention this is if we were to solve the governance problem, the public security problem in Guerrero, Guerrero would still have serious economic difficulties because it doesn't have any economic viability, except for maybe Acapulco. There's really nothing there. We need to refocus that and stop subsidizing what's not working. In the case of Tamaulipas, if we were to solve the governance problem, the public security problem in Tamaulipas, it would boom immediately precisely because of commerce. We have ports there. We have the Gulf of Mexico in terms of energy and gas and oil exploration and stuff, and of course all of the border. So what we've done wrong is to leave to their own devices these areas of the country that really are begging. They're calling out for growth. And they would grow if only you just, and actually they are growing, but they would grow exponentially if they were given a chance. And I think that's a refocusing that we need to do.
There are hundreds of caucuses in the United States Congress. The Congressional Border Caucus is made up of 9 of us who represent the geographic stretch of the border from Brownsville all the way to San Diego, California. We do have involvement from other members of Congress that may not necessarily have districts that geographically sit on the border. For example, Congresswoman Davis and Congressman Peterson from San Diego, and the 2 Congressmen and Congresswoman Lujan from New Mexico, or participate in our efforts. But we're doing 2 things right now. One, along with the Department of Commerce, we're participating in the Heartland Tour, which is we're going into states away from the border so that we can educate people who live in those states as to the value of their trade relationship with Mexico. I like to pick on the state of Wisconsin because probably a lot of folks in Wisconsin don't realize that 57% of their cheese exports go to Mexico. By the same token, the folks that are eating, Oaxaca cheese in Mexico probably don't realize that that cheese, would be surprised to find out that cheese comes from Wisconsin, right? So that's one of the things we're doing. And of course, we have some new initiatives we're working on, which is we really like for the White House to consider a Southern Border Innovation Institute, as one of going forward as one of their institutes that they've awarded around the country. We would like the White House to focus on an institute that would focus on the trade and manufacturing businesses that are going on from Brownsville to San Diego and Tijuana to Matamoros.
The U.S.-Mexico border is a basic lifeline for both countries. $500 billion worth of commerce goes through there. Direct implication of the U.S.-Mexico border, and this does not include Canada, is 6 million, and Senator Cornyn was talking about this yesterday, 6 million people, 6 million American jobs directly depend on commerce with Mexico. And these are people that are not going to have livelihoods if there is an issue in terms of our border. The border, people say shut down the border. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's not, I mean, to say that is you might as well shut down all of the airports. It's not viable, and it's incorrect. If we manage to the best of our ability the border, I think we can have a much more prosperous North America. And by the way, Mexico doesn't have a hidden agenda. I mean, there's no, unlike China, unlike Russia, that have very, very strong anti-U.S. hidden agendas that are out there and they're just looking for an advantage, Mexico's not going to do that. We're not going to be spying, at least not as a national policy. We're not going to be spying on your companies. We're not going to be trying to go up against U.S. national interests in any way, shape, or form. In fact, our national interest and the U.S. national interest are one. And so that is a very basic thing. And if we can create that zone of economic development on the border and really, really take it to its potential, it's going to be of great benefit to North America and North Americans.